all about Jesus. I love my family. Today's Mother's Day. I think everybody here realizes that. But on Mother's Day, it's a day that we try to honor our mothers for the sacrifices that they've made for us and in their lives. I want you to take a look up here. This is my mother with, well, where's the picture? There, back up. Okay. Somebody had it because there was supposed to be a picture of my mother with her absolute most wonderful child. Now you got to know who that was. It was me. And something has happened to the picture. So I don't know if that's an omen or not. But anyway, you were supposed to see a picture of me with my mother. But my mother passed away in July of 2018. That was a little over 6 years after she suffered a very serious stroke that slowed her down and eventually put her in a nursing home. She was very spunky. Now, do we have the picture now? Now we do. She was very spunky. You can quite see that at a basketball game that I took her to see the UK women play several years ago. She loved going to those basketball games. And Stephanie can tell you that probably the maddest I ever saw my mother was one year when I was working for the Anderson News. The Anderson County High School girls basketball team was ranked number 2 in the state and made the state tournament at Bowling Green. Then knowing that I would have to stay in Bowling Green for several days and the setup, now do we not have that picture either? There we go. There we go. I thought we were having more problems. I was going to tell you, forget it then. Anyway, that particular year, they were ranked, the girls basketball team up there was ranked number 2 in the state, and Mom was extremely close to this young lady who was one of their best players and was an all-state player. And she was wanting to go, but knowing that I was going to have to stay several days in Bowling Green, and also knowing that they set up at Diddle Arena there at Western Kentucky University was such that I could not work and keep an eye on her like I usually did at high school arenas around here. I knew it wasn't going to work out. Stephanie was going with me, but because of the setup, she was actually working as well. She was taking pictures, and so her credential that the state gave us, she had to sit there near the basket on the floor, underneath the basket. So, we knew that we could not take my mother to Bowling Green for 4 days. Let's just say she was not happy. Quite unhappy, and when Stephanie and I told her that I could not work it out, and she was going to have to stay home, when I left, she made me feel lower than a snake's belly. A few weeks before she died, my mother was still calling me dummy. And when I'd walk into her room at the nursing home, usually the first words she would say to me were what, Stephanie?
Sit down and hush.
Sit down and hush, if you didn't hear it. Sit down and hush. I hadn't even said anything. And that was how she was. But I was fortunate because my mother was probably the biggest influence I had on my life. Because she made sure I was in church whether I wanted to be or not. She made sure I went to the youth routes whether I wanted to or not. She made sure I spent a week, sometimes 2, at Camp Calvary every year. And that was at the time where they only had 5 or 6 weeks of camp. And some of you remember that. She played the piano at Corinth Christian Church for 57 years. The photo you see here was taken by a nurse just a few months before she passed away. They rolled her up to a piano at the nursing home. She was fully supportive of me when I decided to go to Bible college, not close by, but I drove 650 miles one way. She was very supportive of that. My mom was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but looking back on it, I believe I was fortunate. Very, very fortunate. Not everybody can say that. Sometimes it's because their parents have no regard for Jesus Christ. Sometimes it's because they don't understand the mission of Christ. In fact, Jesus' own mother had times where she didn't understand his own mission. And that's where we're going to pick up today. I want you to think about what we'll be reading here from Mark chapter 3, starting with verse 20, and then verse 21, and then we'll skip down to verse 31 through verse 35. Let's read along. Mark chapter 3. Then he went home, and the crowd gathered again, so they could not even eat. When his family heard it, they went out to seize him, for they were saying, "He is out of his mind." This is all talking about Jesus. Then go on to verse 31. And his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside they sent to him and called him. And a crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you." And he answered, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking about at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother." I think what Jesus is saying here is if you're going to be a member of the family of God, if you're going to be part of the family of God, that comes with a great cost. It comes with a great cost. All these ideas, I think, are found right here in these few verses. If you're a part of God's family, it comes with a great cost. And the first one is people might think you are crazy for following Jesus. Last week in my sermon, I shared with you some alarming statistics from the Gallup poll people. Those statistics were that 21% of Americans say they attend services, religious services every week. About 1 in 5. An additional 9% say they attend almost every week. 31% though, 10% more than say they go weekly. 31% say they never attend religious services. Another 25% say they seldom attend. Think about that now. 21% weekly versus 31% that say they never attend. Or add those two together. 30% say they attend weekly or almost weekly versus 56% that say they attend never or seldom. This poll, by the way, was published last year, 2024. Another statistic from the same people. In 2023, only 45% of Americans said religion is important to them. Less than half. 1973, 50 years before that number was 87%. That shows how we have slipped. It's not just in America either. Another study that was published in 2018, that trend showed it was even worse in other countries. In Canada, 27% said religion is important to them. Australia, 18%. Germany, 11%. The United Kingdom, which is England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, it was 11%. France, 10%. Now I picked those out simply because, why do you think I picked those out? Because those countries are the ones that we would think of that are most similar to the United States. Would you agree with that? Those are the ones that are like that. So it's not just a problem here. It's not just a problem in the United States. It's a problem worldwide. And in an environment like that, chances are that some people might say, you're crazy for following Jesus Christ. Do you know anyone that thinks you are a religious nut or just plain crazy for following Christ? If you're truly following Christ, I'll guarantee you there's somebody out there that thinks that. Early in his ministry, Jesus' own family thought that. You think about that. Jesus' own family thought he was crazy. Look at some of today's texts. And when his family heard it, they went out to seize him, for they were saying, he is out of his mind. Why? In Mark's account of Jesus Christ, it was not long, he's writing not long after, or his account picks up not long after Jesus had called his disciples. But before that, he was healing people, casting out demons, and because of that, people were flocking to him. But what did his family say? He's out of his mind. His family might have been irritated. We don't know. They might have been irritated because the crowds were so big. If you look at verse 20, the crowds were so big, they couldn't even go home and eat. That might have been their last straw. But his own family said, what? He is out of his mind. And they thought they were acting for his own good. Does that ever happen today? Where people are really following Jesus and people say, well, they're out of their mind. We've got to slow this down. They thought they were acting for his own good. In verse 21 it says, they went out to seize him. And the Greek word there is a word proteo, which means to take hold of or to arrest. They wanted to just physically slow Jesus down, take control of what he was doing, keep him from doing anything. And the Greek language suggests they'd even considered the possibility that Jesus would resist them. So they were ready to really take some force because they said, he's out of his mind. You know, their motives might have been good. Their motives might have been pure. But you just think about that. Jesus, his own family, thought he was crazy. And when you think about that, that's even harder to understand. Verse 31, which we've already read, says Mary was there. Mary knew the circumstances of Jesus' birth. She already knew that. She knew the entire story. And yet she was still trying to hold back Jesus from his ministry. My question for you is, are you truly committed to Jesus Christ in a truly radical way? Are you committed in a truly radical way that Jesus calls for us? We know that we are sinners. We know that we have to rely on God's grace. We have to love others. We have to forsake the treasures of the world. We are here to tell others about Jesus. We are here to be completely opposite of what the world is. If you're really committed to Jesus, if you're really committed to doing those things, if you are really committed to knowing that you are someone who is without any hope without Jesus Christ, I will guarantee you that you have friends or family that say, you are a religious nut, you are out of your mind. But if that happens to you, you can take heart. Why? It happened to Jesus. It happened to Jesus. People may think you're crazy for following Jesus Christ. So that leads us to the second thing. Today's Mother's Day. But don't let your family, don't let your earthly family come between you and God's family. It's common to hear people say, nothing means more to me than my family. And that's understandable. And we hear it a lot, especially around Mother's Day or around Father's Day, because most people at these times of the year, what do? They get sentimental and they start thinking about it. I do it. I think most people do. And we spend our time around that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you look at what happened to Jesus, when his own biological family tried to see him, Jesus looked at the people who were gathered around him. He looked at the people that were gathered around him. They were there to hear him teach. They were there to hear him maybe see him do something supernaturally. And what did Jesus say? He said, "Here are my mother and brothers. For whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." And sometimes, folks, that's difficult for us to take to heart, isn't it? That's very hard sometimes to take to heart. We might know it intellectually, but really living that can be very difficult. Now, before I go any further, I don't want anybody here to get the wrong idea and say, well, John is saying that Jesus is saying to neglect your family. That's not what we're saying. Jesus wasn't rejecting his family. I don't believe that. Because if you look on the cross, Mary was there at his crucifixion. And Jesus looked to John. And what did he tell John? Anybody remember? He said, "Take care of my mother." Take care of my mother. His brother, James, wrote a book in the New Testament. The book of James is written by Jesus' half-brother. So yeah, Jesus valued those relationships. And we have family obligations, and family is important. But what Jesus did was he took a moment to teach a very, very powerful lesson that don't allow your earthly family to undermine your relationship with Christ or to supersede it. Read that again. Don't allow your earthly family to undermine your relationship with Jesus or to supersede it. But unfortunately, that's exactly what Jesus' earthly family was trying to do at this time in his ministry. It might not even been their intention. But think about it. It wasn't the first time. In Luke chapter 2, Jesus was 12 years old, and he attended a Passover celebration in Jerusalem with his family. But unbeknownst to his family when he left, unbeknownst to his parents when they left, what did Jesus do? He stayed behind in the temple and was teaching at 12 years old. After 3 days, his mother and father realized that he wasn't with them. So they searched everywhere for him, and they found him in the temple. And in Luke 2:48 we read, "And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, 'Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress.' And Jesus said to them, 'Why were you looking for me? Did you know that I must be in my Father's house?'" Or some of your translations may say, "Don't you know I need to be about my Father's business?" John chapter 2, Jesus and his mother were at a wedding. They were at a wedding in the town of Cana. They ran out of wine. Pick up in verse 3. It says, "When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, 'They have no wine.' And Jesus said to her, 'Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come.'" You see, I believe Jesus' mother and his family did what anybody would have done. They knew their connections. They went to him. But what they were asking stood in the way of what Jesus' mission was at that time. Because, see, they were human beings. They were finite. Jesus, Son of God. Folks, it's easy. It's easy to let our own people stay and obscure our relationship with Jesus Christ. It's easy to do that. Mark chapter 3, Jesus' family was trying to use their connections to get to him while he was teaching. During his ministry, Jewish people were trying to say, well, he's our Messiah. He's our Messiah. And they looked at their own heritage. Hey, we're special. We're Jews. We need to be close to you. But what did Jesus say to them? In John chapter 8, verses 39 and 40, we read, they answered him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would be doing the works Abraham did. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. This is not what Abraham did. In other words, what Jesus is saying, God's way supersedes all others. Now, as I noted earlier, Jesus told John on the cross, he said, care for my mother. Could Jesus have supernaturally cared for his mother? I believe he could have. I believe he could have. But the night before he was crucified, remember what Jesus prayed. He said, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, what? Read it with me. Not my will, but yours be done. Jesus kept the Jewish law. Jesus celebrated the feast. Unlike those who want to call on their own heritage, Jesus did everything the Old Testament law said to do. He did it perfectly. Remember again what he told those people? He said, if you were Abraham's children, you would be doing the works Abraham did. In other words, focus on God. Focus on God. Focus on doing his will. Folks, you can focus on doing his will and you're still going to fail, aren't you? You're going to fall. You're going to come up short. Guess what? I come up short every day. All of us do. But focus on God's will. That supersedes everything. You know, we look back today and we have a lot of history to look back on. We have over 2,000 years of history, of church history to look back on. I think about my own life, and I'm thankful for my mother. I'm very thankful for her. Because like I told you earlier, she made me go to church even though there were times I didn't want to. She made me go. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for any mother or any father who does that. Some of you were raised that exact same way. And if you were, be very thankful because you're fortunate. But at the same time, I'm going to beg you, moms, dads, brothers, sisters, friends, all of you, never forget that God's mission, that Jesus' mission supersedes all that. Sometimes it's hard to accept, but it's true. You see, it happened to Jesus. It can happen to us. Last thing we see is that God's family is the best. God's family is the best. Excuse me. God's family is the best. Jesus told us why. Look there in verse 34 and 35. Who are my mother and brothers? And looking about at those who sat around him, he said, here are my mother and brothers. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother. You see, being part of God's family, being in God's family, is not based on our blood, but the blood of Jesus Christ, and our family and through Christ is eternal. Folks, I'm going to tell you something. Our earthly families can disappoint us, can they not? My guess is, and I may be wrong, but my guess is that everyone in here this morning have family members somewhere along the line with whom you don't get along. If that's not the case in your family, you are extremely fortunate. Sometimes families, they clash because of a personality. And folks, if you want to see a good family fight, have an estate to settle. Because you have families split over whether somebody gets a chair or not. Yeah, we have problems in our family because we're human. Sometimes our problems are because of one's choice of following Jesus. When I was in college at Roanoke Bible College in North Carolina, there was a man there. He was a graduate school that was right down the road, and he was around campus a lot. We all got to know him. He was a preacher in the area, and he was cut off from his family completely because of his choice to follow Jesus. They considered him dead because he was following Jesus. And Jesus said that kind of stuff is going to happen if we're truly following Him. Luke chapter 12 said, "So, do you think that I have come to give peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, in one house there will be 5 divided, 3 against 2, 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, daughter-in-law against or mother-in-law against daughter, or daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law." Folks, I was trying to get ahead of myself. I apologize. Hopefully you read that with me. But why does that happen? Jesus says it's because of the gospel. Some will follow and some will not. That's just how it is. And ultimately, when we are radically following Jesus like we see in the New Testament, when we are radically following Jesus, somewhere along the line, somebody close to us is going to say, "I don't want to have anything to do with you," or "I don't want anything to do with that." That's the cost of following Jesus. Jesus isn't saying, go out and pick a fight with your family. He's not saying that. What He is saying is if you're truly doing His will, some people close to you are going to turn on you. Did it happen to Jesus? Yes, it did. And if it happened to Him, it can happen to us. But you see, God's family is rooted not in our greed and our faults and our failure to understand, but in trying to do God's will. Folks, we're going to mess up. We're going to disagree at times. We're going to do things wrong. But if we're truly living as God's people, we can forgive each other. We can forgive. Put our wants and our desires aside and focus on Jesus. After all, what's it all about? What's our slogan this year? It's all about Jesus. So, where does that leave us now? What does it mean for us today? I've been going through all this and reading what happened to Jesus. But what does it mean to you? One is to make sure your family is firmly grounded in Jesus. Today is Mother's Day, and we rightly celebrate and reflect on the impact of our mothers. But you know what the ultimate impact or the ultimate mark of familial success is? It's a family that's totally committed to doing God's will, regardless of the cost. Make sure that your family is firmly grounded in God's will. Also, expect opposition. If you're truly following Christ, you're going to have opposition. It just happens. It might be family, it might be friends, it might be others close to you, but it's going to happen. But you know something? It happened to Jesus. So take heart. And the last thing is to rely on God's family. Folks, there's a group of people in here. I think there's about 40 people in here today. We're imperfect. None of us in here are perfect. We're imperfect people. We mess up. We have our faults. But through the blood of Jesus Christ, we can still come together. That's what I pray you do. Rely on God's family. Let's pray together.